It's the early 20th century, and England is changing rapidly. In the small Yorkshire village of Calthorne, life centers around coal mining. Families depend on this work to survive, with everyone, even children, contributing. Life is tough but familiar, built on routine and close family ties. For Emily Swan and her family, this way of life brings both comfort and challenges. Emily Swan was born in 1861, one of 10 children in Calthorne. Her father, John Hinchcliffe, worked long, grueling hours in the coal mines, a job that was both exhausting and dangerous. Coal mining fueled England's booming industries, powering factories and creating materials that transformed the country. Like most families in mining villages, the Hinchcliffes relied on the mines to make ends meet. However, this demanding work often left them tired and isolated, with little hope for change. During Emily's childhood, school wasn't mandatory. Most children, especially girls, stayed home or started working early. For Emily, this meant doing household chores, caring for younger siblings, and eventually marrying a local working man. When she married William Swan, a skilled glassblower, she was ready for the hard work of managing a home and raising a family. William Swan was well regarded in the community for his craft and steady job. Together, he and Emily had 11 children. Large families were common, as more children often meant extra help with work. Their life was much like other working families in Yorkshire, busy and predictable. But the strain of William's demanding job and the pressure of providing for a large family began to take a toll on him. The dependable man Emily had married grew irritable and quick-tempered. His frustrations often turned toward Emily. She, who had built her life around her home and family, started feeling anxious and alone. Neighbors noticed the growing tension in the Swan household. The sounds of arguments, William's raised voice, and Emily's withdrawn demeanor became the talk of the village. For Emily, her home no longer felt like a sanctuary. Instead, it became a place of unease, where she braced herself for William's outbursts. These changes marked the beginning of a chain of events that would lead to shocking developments in the village. As the years went by and William's temper worsened, Emily found herself more isolated than ever. She managed the household, looked after her children, and did her best to keep things running smoothly, all while trying to avoid her husband's unpredictable moods. Her world had become small and lonely, shaped by a daily effort to keep the peace. It was during this time that John Gallagher entered her life, a change that would soon turn everything upside down. John Gallagher, a 30-year-old lodger, was a hard-working laborer who kept to himself. Renting a room in the Swan household brought in some extra income, a common need for working families like the Swans. But as William's behavior grew worse, John's presence in the home took on a new meaning. He noticed the strain Emily was under and, unlike others, treated her with kindness. For a woman used to William's temper and coldness, John's small acts of kindness, listening to her, offering a bit of sympathy, were a source of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. This quiet bond between Emily and John didn't escape the attention of the neighbors. In the close-knit community of Calthorne, where everyone knew each other's business, even the smallest interactions were noticed. Soon, rumors started spreading about Emily and John's relationship. Gossip spread quickly, and what began as whispered remarks soon grew into a scandal. People in the village began to see their friendship as something more, assuming every interaction between them was proof of an affair. These rumors added a new layer of stress to Emily's life. As the whispers grew, so did the judgment and disapproval from those around her. William, too, noticed the attention John was giving his wife. Already burdened by his frustrations and temper, William's jealousy and suspicion only made things worse. He became even more hostile, lashing out at Emily in ways that were harsher than before. The Swan household grew increasingly tense, and Emily found herself trapped between the rare kindness John showed her and the bitter anger of her husband. Sensing the growing tension, John decided it was best to move out. The rumors, the strained atmosphere, and the increasing hostility created a situation that could no longer be ignored. But even after he left, John didn't completely disappear from Emily's life. He continued to visit from time to time, which only added fuel to the gossip and speculation around their relationship. Each visit reignited talk in the community, keeping the scandal alive. For some, John's presence hinted at something inappropriate, while others suspected different motives. Whatever the truth, his visits kept the story going, and with each passing day, the pressure within the Swan household grew. By June 1903, John finally decided to leave for good, planning to move to Bradford and distance himself from the tangled situation in Calthorne. But just days before he was set to leave, a confrontation would erupt, turning all the rumors and tension into a tragedy that the village would never forget. On the evening of June 6, 1903, just days before John Gallagher planned to leave Calthorne for good, a tragic chain of events began to unfold. That night, John was at a neighbor's house, Mrs. Ward's, where he started drinking. He was feeling the weight of his decision to leave Calthorne and possibly the complicated feelings he had developed for Emily. As he sat there was a knock at the door. It was Emily, looking visibly upset, her face partially hidden by a shawl. When she removed it, her bruised face revealed a story that needed no words. Emily's eyes were swollen and bruised, her face showing fresh marks from yet another beating by William. She shared her story with Mrs. Ward, her distress and fear evident to everyone in the room. Seeing Emily's injuries, John's face grew dark with anger. Known for his fiery temper, John couldn't hold back the rage that had been building up inside him. Without a word, he stormed out of Mrs. Ward's house and headed straight for the Swan household, with Emily hurrying after him, trying to catch up. His steps were quick and determined as he shouted, "I'll coffin him before morning." His deadly intent was clear to anyone who heard him. Emily followed, torn between wanting to stop him and longing for an end to her suffering. Neighbors noticed the commotion, sensing that something serious was about to happen. When John reached the Swan home, he barged in, and a violent fight broke out. The sounds of shouting and crashing echoed through the quiet village. Neighbors who gathered outside described the struggle as fierce and lasting around 10 minutes. When John finally came out, he looked shaken, but still furious. Back at Mrs. Ward's house, he bragged that he had broken 4 of Mrs. Swan's ribs and threatened to break some more. His mix of anger and pride left everyone around him in shock, but John wasn't done. He declared, "I'll finish him off before going to Bradford," and returned to the Swan house. This time his voice carried through the village as he yelled, "I'll murder the pig before morning." Frightened neighbors followed him, bracing themselves for what they might witness. Another round of fighting erupted, just as loud and violent as the first. Moments later, John and Emily emerged from the house, hand in hand, looking calm, as though nothing had happened. Their unsettling calm stunned the onlookers. Only minutes earlier, they had been part of a brutal confrontation. Now they walked together, their fingers intertwined, leaving everyone speechless. Inside the house lay the grim truth. William Swan was dead. His violent death had played out for the entire village to hear. The impact of that night's events was only beginning to spread. Emily and John confessed the details to Mrs. Ward, showing no sign of regret. News of the crime spread quickly, and the police soon arrived to investigate. John was nowhere to be found, but Emily was arrested without any resistance, her fate now tied to the tragic events of the night. For days, the village buzzed with talk of the murder. William Swan's death and the strange behavior of John and Emily became the center of every conversation. A quiet village was now forever marked by a crime no one could forget. A manhunt for John Gallagher began. Emily, now in police custody, calmly recounted the night's events, her detached demeanor unnerving everyone. Meanwhile, John had disappeared, leaving a sense of unfinished business hanging over Calthorne. For 2 months, the search for John stretched far beyond the village, with locals speculating about his whereabouts and what would happen when he was caught. 2 months later, authorities found John in Middlesbrough, living under a false name. He was arrested and brought back to Barnsley, where he and Emily were formally charged with the murder of William Swan. For the people of Calthorne, the trial became the most talked about event. Everyone wanted to know the full truth behind the scandal that had shaken their community. In December 1903, the courtroom was packed with neighbors, journalists, and curious onlookers. The prosecution presented a strong case recounting John's violent threats, his repeated return to the Swan home, and the brutal nature of the attack. Witnesses spoke of his loud warnings, the sounds of the struggle, and the eerie calm with which he and Emily had left the scene. Each testimony painted a picture of a household torn apart by tension, suspicion, and violence. One part of the trial that especially captivated the community was the testimony about Emily and John's relationship. Witnesses spoke about John's attention toward Emily, their secretive exchanges, and the rumors that had swirled for months. Some neighbors described John as behaving too familiarly with her, and a few even claimed to have heard Emily encouraging him during his final fatal fight with William. This painted a deeply disturbing image of Emily, not simply as a woman enduring abuse, but as someone who might have played a role in planning the attack. The prosecution aimed to show that Emily had not only tolerated John's violent intentions, but had supported them, fueling his rage against her husband. As the trial went on, it became clear that the evidence against both Emily and John was mounting. The portrayal of them as cold and unfeeling only made matters worse. In the end, both were found guilty and sentenced to death, a sentence that held enormous weight in a community that had once known them as neighbors. Appeals were filed, and pleas for mercy were made on Emily's behalf. But the severity of the crime and the public's call for justice left little room for compassion. The court upheld their sentences, finding no reason to show leniency. On December 29, 1903, both Emily Swan and John Gallagher were led to the gallows. In their final moments, they exchanged a few quiet words, a last farewell that left onlookers with a haunting image of two people whose choices had led them to this tragic end. As the sentence was carried out, the village of Cal Thorne, and all those who had followed the case, were left with a dark story that would linger for years to come. For many, it became a stark reminder of how anger, isolation, and desperation could twist even the most ordinary lives into something unimaginable and sinister. The executions of Emily Swan and John Gallagher left a lasting impact on Cal Thorne. What began as a quiet tale of family struggles and whispered rumors ended in a tragedy that the village would never forget. For the villagers, it served as a warning of the hidden darkness that can exist behind closed doors, even among familiar faces. The story of Emily and John became a cautionary tale, passed down in whispers, about the tragic consequences of isolation, resentment, and unchecked anger. If you found this story interesting, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Tap the bell to stay updated on our latest videos.